Hello there, S.A. again. 50 years ago, the Paris Peace Treaty was signed, officially bringing about the end of U.S. involvement in Vietnam, which in turn led to the end of the war completely 2 years later with a South Vietnamese defeat. However, this video is really not about Vietnam at all. Even though I will concede, while I was around at the time I was a wee little kid, I wasn't paying attention. However, I did see footage of the fall of Saigon, and at the time I remember hearing the word Vietnam, but that's about as much as I knew at the time. Of course, later on I found out the whole damn deal was going on there, but it is what it is. As I said, this video is not really about Vietnam at all. This is about the war in Eastern Europe. You know, that little spot on the map that most people can't find, with a Rabbit Alley road atlas, a flashlight, and a trail of breadcrumbs. Yeah, that place, Ukraine. But before we get too much deeper into this diatribe, first, I have to sell you something. Has sex lost its fun? Does Netflix and chill more like boring and no chill at all? Well, guess what? I'm not just some fool who complains about stuff on the internet. I also am a published author, and I have 2 books just for you. Glitch, A Precarious Duo, and Glitch, The Future is Unwritten. And they're both available right now on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and other fine bookstores. And I won't bore you with all the details. Let's just say that if you like Thelma and Louise, or if you're from my generation, you have fond memories of Vanishing Point, then believe me, you'll enjoy a Glitch. Yep, I'm no shit. And, wait for it, I got more books coming down the pike. So, if I don't get run over by a train, you'll be seeing those books pretty soon, too. Now, back to the video. Alright, now that bit of business is over with. Back to the show. Now, this is like Vietnam. This is basically a big fat shit sandwich. I mean, anyone whose brains are working knows this. And really smart people like John Mersheimer, I'm totally mispronouncing his name, like really smart college professor out there in the University of Illinois in Chicago. Yeah, he definitely said this mess never should have happened. And he's right. I mean, if we stuck to that handshake agreement that George W's father had with Gorbachev back during the Malta conference, none of this mess would have happened. But unfortunately, we were hijacked by a bunch of neocons who thought differently. And here we are. And indeed, even when the mess first kicked off, the people in Moscow were looking for a deal. You know, a deal. You know, like Republicans. Okay, like some Republicans, but you know what I mean. But Boris Johnson, you know, that big dude with the fucked up haircut, nah, he had to stick his 2 cents in. And believe me, anyone who looked at this guy knows that he never has an original thought in his head. So he clearly was being the sock puppet to the Wicked Witch of the West, Victoria Nuland, and that other clown, Blinken. So there you go. And they basically threw the negotiations out the window. And, wait for it, according to oh my God, what's the guy's name? Glenn. Phooey. Man, I can't think of the guy's name now. Glenn Greenbaum, I think his name is. Yeah, I think I'm totally mispronouncing his name. Yeah, but according to him, he said that one of the main reasons this mess happened, I mean, yeah, the whole NATO expansion, that was a big deal. But one of the things he said that this thing really kicked off was because, are you ready? A bunch of crazy woke leftists who are inside the State Department, they saw this as a way of this war to punish the Russians. And for what? Are you ready? The Russian collusion hoax. And you say, wait, what? Yeah, I know. It's a hoax. It's not real. It's fake. Well, guess what? People whose brains work know it's a fake, but these knuckleheads, they think it's real. They think that somehow Vladimir Putin, using some mystic nights of the oingo boingo hocus pocus, snapped his finger and made Trump president. And of course, anyone whose brains works knows, no. Hillary, you know, their precious Hillary, was just a crap candidate, and that's why she lost. And yet these knuckleheads been dragging that grudge around like a damn battleship anchor around their neck for 6, 7 long years, and therefore they're going to sit there and carry out their BS grudge on the Russians. Except, let's just say this: the only people who are getting hurt are the people in Kiev, because it's their country that's getting blown up and their people are dying. Because anyone who was paying attention must have saw that video where Lindsey Graham, yeah, old Lindsey, always Robin but never the Batman, sitting there saying that we made a very thrifty investment to kill Russians. Yeah, he said that. And of course, anyone who was paying attention knows that, well, it seems like you haven't killed as many Russians as you think you had. I'm not saying Russians ain't getting killed. Of course they're getting killed. These guys are not bulletproof. But let's just say this: these people are so delusional that they actually thought that they spent a measly 5% of our defense budget to kill 50% of the Russian army. I'm thinking no. But regardless of that, we know how this war is going to end. And it's not going to end with a Ukrainian victory. And before those NAFO clowns are sitting there on the typewriter right now saying, no, 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 Ukraine's going to win, Ukraine's going to win. We know it, we're certain of it. Shut up, okay? I mean, if you clowns want to believe in leprechauns and fairies and the Loch Ness Monster, fine, go ahead, believe what you want to believe. But people whose brains still work knows it's bullshit, and Ukraine winning this war, short of a total nuclear exchange between us and the Ruskies, it ain't gonna happen. And especially, I'm talking about you, kings and generals, and you, the infographic show, putting out that BS bullshit. I mean, what do? Getting a paycheck from the State Department from Newland's personal account peddling that garbage? Or you just watching too much CNN and MSNBC and reading The Guardian and The Telegraph and watching too much Sky News? I mean, anyone who gets your information from those places, of course you're going to believe that the damn people in Kiev about to kick in the door to the Kremlin and drag the old Vlad out by his ear and spank his hiney for being a naughty boy. Of course, that's not going to happen either. But what about the future? Exactly how this war is going to end? Well, anyone whose brain work knows that predicting the future is a waste of anyone's time. Indeed, a lot of people have been trying to predict the future forever and usually made an ass of themselves. Don't believe me? Look up an incident that happened around 1000 AD when a bunch of very serious religious scholars somehow got in their heads that around 1000 AD the world was going to end and Jesus Christ was going to return to the earth. Well, guess what? 1000 AD came and went, and Jesus didn't come. So I guess the world didn't end. And of course, same thing with old Nostradamus. I mean, hey, I got a copy of his book up on the shelf. And in that book of his, he claims that the world's going to end in the year 6300 or something. Will it end? I don't know, but I don't think anyone that's living and breathing now is going to be sticking around with their stopwatches seeing if he's going to be right on that prediction or not. And then, of course, you have these real serious cosmetologists, like Neil deGrasse Tyson, who said that the whole universe is going to end from heat death. Now, who's going to stick around for the next trillion years to see if that's going to happen? Yeah, nobody I know. However, there are smart people who look at trends. For example, people who play the stock market. They look at trends. Is the market going to be a bear market or is it going to be a bull market? Yeah, they're looking at trends. And of course, while you can say, but the damn stock market is a damn casino, yeah, I agree. But it doesn't mean that someone like Bloomberg isn't wrong all the time. He looks at the trends and he says, okay, I think certain stock's going to go up in the next quarter, and I might think another stock is going to go down in the next quarter. Sometimes he's right, sometimes he's not. But in the case of Ukraine, no one knows the future, okay? Old stupid Biden sitting behind Resolute desk might wake up tomorrow morning and push the big red button and cancel all our tickets, and that's it. Or Putin might lose his mind and do the same thing and blow us up twice over. That might happen, or it might not happen. So yeah, trying to predict the future is a waste of your time. But you can look at trends, and the trends say Ukraine is going to lose. Only question is how. There's two ways it can lose. Either A, it could lose the way Germany did in the First World War, or B, it can lose the way Vietnam did, or I should say South Vietnam did. And of course, some of you who've been paying attention to the news probably already heard that Newland and a few other people on our side of the fence been trying to get the people in Moscow to have a so-called pause. Not really a peace treaty, but kind of like an armistice. And sort of like with the Korean War. Problem is, the people in Moscow, they ain't biting. They just aren't. Why? Well, basically they're kind of pissed. Because they've been warning anyone who would listen to them that they did not like NATO marching to their front door. And something bad was going to happen if they kept ignoring their security concerns. Well, guess what? The people on our side of the fence kept ignoring their security concerns, and here we are. So how does it end? Well, it's not going to end the way the Korean War ended, because anyone who knows better knows that the Korean War officially isn't over. You say, but you say, how's that possible? Simple. They had an armistice, but no peace treaty. So technically, North and South Korea, and by extension, China and the United States, and Russia too, are still technically at war with each other. It's just that no one hasn't done anything for real since 1953. And that's what these clowns on our side of the fence were trying to convince the people in Moscow to do. But guess what? As far as they were concerned, one frozen conflict on their doorstep is one enough. They don't want two. Especially when these clowns were sitting there flapping their lips about what they really meant by a frozen conflict. And indeed, the brothers at the Duran.com, they said so. They said that these clowns on our side of the fence want to freeze the conflict, and then when the smoke clears and everyone's licking their wounds, we, the United States, and the collective West by extension, will rearm and rebuild the Ukrainian military. And for what purpose? Yeah, that's right. For then the war to start up again. And of course, you're surprised that the people in Moscow said, "Niet." So, how is this war going to end then? So it ain't going to end with a freeze or a so-called armistice. Well, if you take the First World War scenario, it will likely end when too many Ukrainians die. And of course, if you're paying attention, you probably figure too many Ukrainians have died already. And I'll be the first one to tell you, I agree. But apparently not enough to stop the fighting. But anyway, back to the First World War scenario. When too many soldiers on the so-called Central Powers, Germany, Austria-Hungary, and of course the Turks, died, they basically had a rebellion in the Central Powers armies. Well, okay, that's only slightly true, because in the case of the Austro-Hungary, they basically lost too many soldiers and they couldn't fight back any longer. If you look at the history books, they said that their army collapsed in 1918. They just didn't have any more men to fight, and therefore they waved a white flag and said, "We give up." And the Italians who they were fighting at the time, they said they accepted their surrender, and they moved Italian soldiers into Innsbruck, Austria. But as far as the Italians went. And then, of course, Bulgaria, they waved the white flag and surrendered. And the Serbs, who were basically fighting on the Allied side, they accepted the surrender real fast. And then finally, the Turks, they surrendered. I mean, it was almost like a house of cards, you know, one after the other after the other. And then finally, the German army basically mutinied. They just said 5 seconds after the British and the French practically were kicking in the door of the Hindenburg Line, which basically marked the boundary between Germany and the Allied forces. They basically said, "We're not going to fight anymore." And indeed, if you look in the history books, they actually revolted against the German government, and they had something called the German Revolution of 1918-1919, where not only German army revolted, the German Navy, was it the Kaiser Marine? I know that's kind of weird, but that's how the Germans described their Navy, the Kaiser Marine. It's weird, yeah, I know. Yeah, they revolted. They said, we're not going to fight no more. And then 5 seconds after that, the crooked mustache himself, the Kaiser, he abdicated and fled the country. And then one of the royal princes took over control briefly and helped negotiate the Versailles Treaty, which ended the war for good. Of course, history books tell us Germany got the shitty end of the stick of the Versailles Treaty, but whatever. And thus, when you look what's going on with Moscow, that could the Ruskies, yeah, that's a pretty good trend to follow. I mean, they fought this miserable war that didn't need to be fought. They lost a lot of people, not as much as Ukrainians, but they did lose quite a bit of people. And I think they would probably would force harsh terms on the people in Kiev. Yeah, I think they would. Will it be as harsh as what the Germans got during the Versailles Treaty? I don't know about that, but I think it probably would be harsh terms. Yeah. And just like with the Kaiser, I think Zelensky would no longer be leader of Ukraine. And I say that's fair. I mean, anyone who's been paying attention recently knows he's probably ill-equipped to be the leader of anything right now. Yeah. I mean, even Newsweek magazine said the guy is like delusional. I guess he's been having too much nose candy. Was it called Slava cocaine? But whatever. Now, of course, the other scenario this way this war could end was the way Vietnam ended. And Vietnam ended pretty sadly because, according to the history books, the Paris Peace Accords said that, yes, the fighting would stop, the United States would remove their soldiers, and then a election would be held in South Vietnam where the Viet Cong would participate. Except that never happened. Yes, the Americans slowly, gradually moved their army out of South Vietnam, but no election took place. Why? Because the damn people in Hanoi said, you know what, fuck elections. We want what we want. And after several skirmishes, first along the DMZ and then later through Cambodia, they staged a full-scale attack in, I think, yeah, spring 1975. And by April of that year, the war was over. And indeed, when I, as a wee little kid, I remember my parents had a Time magazine, and it showed pictures of the fall of Saigon. And I remember one of the pictures I thought was so telling was this picture of a road from the DMZ between North and South Vietnam, and it was filled with just uniforms of where the South Vietnamese soldiers took off the uniforms and threw them on the ground, took off their boots, even left on their jeeps behind, and just fled. They didn't want to fight no more. They said, fuck this shit, we don't want to die, we give up. They ran away. And then, of course, anyone who's my age remembers what happened with the few Americans that were still in Saigon. You know, that whole fleet of helicopters flying off the roofs of the American embassy. Yeah, very embarrassing. And that could very well happen in Ukraine, where they might try to negotiate a settlement, a peace treaty or whatever, and the fighting might die down a little bit, and then Moscow might say, you know what, why are we negotiating, let's just finish this, and then they just roll up with every soldier they can get their hands on and just say, let's go straight to Kiev and finish this. And then, of course, at that point, the Ukrainians probably won't be able to stop the whole Russian army just marching on through to their capital. And at that point, most of the Ukrainian army, which has pretty much been demoralized. I mean, if you pay attention on the computer, there's multiple videos showing whole units of Ukrainian soldiers just, waving the white flag and giving up. They don't want to fight no more. And wait for it, Clayton Morris, the direct redacted, he said that someone did recent head count, and they determined that the average age of your Ukrainian soldier right now, 2023, is like 43 years old. And you say, how's that possible? Simple. All the young men are dead. All the 18, 25 years old are all shot up or blown up. And now they're going and getting their parents, the fathers and uncles, and putting them in uniform and sending them out there to get shot and blown up. And now you're surprised that so many of these people are now just, with the first chance they get, they surrender to the Russians? They don't want to die. Because you got to remember, the Ukrainian army is a conscript army. No one is volunteering to go out there. And then you say, but wait a second, I heard stories about foreign volunteers. Yeah, that was when the war started. But I guess when people realized this war was not like modern duty fucking video game, that people were actually getting blown up and shot up with real bullets and real artillery shells. Most of these foreigners who showed up there, these LARPers, they said, we out. Yeah, what do you expect? So, yeah. It could definitely end the way Vietnam did. And then, of course, now, of course, you say, well, what happens next? Well, now, if the war ends in the First World War scenario, it'll likely be a redrawing of the map of Europe. Because even though the Russians currently control like 20% of Ukraine, they could probably ask and get more, demand more territory. Because, for example, Odessa, that's a Russian city, or at least it was formed by Catherine the Great. And more than a few people said that, yeah, the Russians probably want that city as part of Nouveau Russia. And of course, a few smart people said, well, there's that place over there on the far end of the country called the Transnistria that's full of a bunch of Russians. And the Ruskies probably want a land bridge from Odessa to there. And if anyone looks at a map, they say, oh boy, that will leave Ukraine landlocked. So there you go. Because if you look at a map of Europe in 1910, another 1920, you would see the whole map of Europe had changed. I mean, for example, in 1910, Poland wasn't there. It was just Germany and Russia sitting side by side. But then after World War I ended, boom, Poland suddenly appeared. And a bunch of other small little countries appeared that weren't there before. So yeah, if this scenario trend ends like the First World War, you can definitely have a redrawing of the European map. Now, if this war ends like Vietnam did, oh boy, it's probably going to hurt for us. Because if you go back to the history books, when Vietnam ended, not only did the South Vietnamese government collapse, but the entire American anti-communist project in Southeast Asia collapsed. Because you go back and look at history books, it wasn't just South Vietnam, it was also Cambodia and Laos. Because all three countries were fighting a communist insurgency, and when South Vietnam fell, so did Cambodia and Laos, all within a few months of each other. Now, in Europe, if Ukraine falls the way South Vietnam did, it could cause problems for Moldova uh, and even Poland because they border the damn country. And could it cause, and you say, oh, nah, you're full of beans. It wouldn't cause the collapse of the Polish government. You sure about that? Because there's a lot of European potentates that invested a lot of time, a lot of money, and a lot of resources for this Ukraine mess. And if the Russians win big by taking over the whole country, the way North Vietnam took over South Vietnam, all those various potentates, from Olaf Scholz to Macron to Meloni down there in Italy, and all the little knuckleheads in between, they all lose their jobs. Every last one of them. So yeah, this thing could be really huge. So what happens in the meantime? Well, you just have to wait for the inevitable, because it's not a question of if, it's only a question of when. And me personally, I think the war might end before the 2024 election. Why? Well, anyone who's been paying attention to what's been going on in Israel, with the Hamas deal, knows that we, the United States, are not, as FDR once referred to us as, the arsenal of democracy. I mean, those days are long past. We just don't have the industrial capacity that we used to have. Because we took every spare artillery shell, Humvee, APRAP, and HIMARS missiles and gave it to the damn Ukrainians. And they wasted them. And now the people in Tel Aviv, they got their begging bowl out saying, hey, what about us? And you think Joe Biden and the knuckleheads around him have anything to give Israel? No. They don't. I mean, the cupboard is bare. And remember, these are the same knuckleheads who just barely 2 years ago kept talking about, oh, Russia is just a gas station for nuclear weapons, and the real threat is China. And therefore we're focused on China, but China is the real threat. Well, guess what? That gas station with nuclear weapons just kicked your fucking ass. I mean, it reminds me of the damn baseball playoffs that happened back in, I think it was 1987, where the Chicago, it was what the Red Sox? Yeah, I think it's Chicago Red Sox. They got into the playoffs for the World Series, and believe me, this was so funny. They were focused on the St. Louis Cardinals because people kept talking about, ooh, freeway cities. But then they had to play the San Diego. And San Diego, that particular year, had a really awful season. And yet somehow they ended up in the playoffs. And Chicago, they were sitting there saying, yeah, freeway series. And what happened? Chicago, went and played San Diego and lost. They got wiped out 4-0. Oh my God. And then San Diego went on to play St. Louis in the World Series. And then guess what happened? They got swept 4-0. Ooh. Oh, that was so bad. That was so bad. Well, guess what? That's basically what's happening right now. The United States is basically Chicago, and China, metaphorically, is St. Louis Cardinals, and Russia is technically San Diego. And the damn people are about to get swept by a country that supposedly is allegedly not a big deal. Well, enough with the baseball metaphors. But yeah, we don't know how this war is going to end, but it will end. And the way the trends are going, it will likely end before the 2024 election. And of course, if that happens, not saying it is going to happen, I don't make any predictions, I'm just following the trends. Joe Biden will not be sitting behind the Resolute desk in January 2025. Who will be sitting behind the desk? I don't know. Because Vivek, Ramaswamy, he recently came on the TV, said that he doesn't even think that Joe Biden is even going to run for president. Well, who's going to run his place? Cackling Harris? Please. Or Gruesome Newsom? Maybe. But even if Biden does run, he's not going to win. So there you go. I mean, Biden, he's a sock puppet for these radical leftists. And these radical leftists, in their crazy, kooky fantasy realm, led us into this miserable war. And of course, our own failings, letting these neocons try to gobble up most of Europe like Pac-Man, also helped out as well. And in the end, the only people who are going to end up getting hurt is the poor Ukrainians. They're not going to get anything out of this, except a lot of full cemeteries. Their country will be wrecked and their people will be dead. And that's a goddamn shame. Truly is. Well, that's all I'm going to say on the Ukraine war. And that's my opinion.